What's going on, everyone? So obviously, sure, most, if not all of you, are aware of the James Harden mess, and it is getting ugly, right? The NBA is investigating now what James Harden said about Daryl Morey lying. The Sixers have already gotten in trouble, and it's time to trade James Harden. It's time to move off of him. And I've talked about how, like, at this point, you almost have to get rid of James Harden for whatever it is, because you need to keep Joel Embiid happy. If Joel Embiid ends up getting upset and demanding or requesting a trade, then the Sixers are cooked, right? Like, now you're starting to rebuild. Like, yeah, you have Maxey, but this isn't the situation that the Sixers had hoped for, right? The idea was to bring James Harden in and then now contend for the NBA championship the next several seasons. They fell short last year, but they were in an opportunity. And for whatever reason, Daryl Morey and James Harden, their relationship is now squandered. And the Clippers seem to be the one destination that James Harden wants to go to. I'm still not, even if they do get James Harden, I'm still not sold on the Clippers, right? Like, on paper, they would look terrifying. In reality, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard can't stay healthy, can't play in the playoffs. James Harden completely disappears in the playoffs. Russell Westbrook is Mr. Reliable, but, he's not the guy that he once was. But he's still, I've been very defensive of Russell Westbrook. But regardless, right? I don't buy it, but send them to the Clippers, get what you can in return, and line it up. And reports have came out, per Brian O'Connor, that the Sixers are looking to potentially add LeBron James next offseason. That's their target. That's what they want, right? And that's why they want to keep James Harden. That's why they don't want to end up losing cap space so they can go and bring in LeBron James. Now, if the Sixers were to keep James Harden or even trade him and get a bunch of expiring contracts and draft picks and stuff like that, then the Sixers would have enough money to sign LeBron James. They'd have enough money to sign a max player as well as another complimentary role player, a really good starting level player. And in theory, this actually wouldn't be terrible, right? You'd have LeBron James, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and then cap space to fill out the rest of your roster, plus exceptions and all that stuff, right? So they could put together a pretty good roster. The East is a lot easier than the Western Conference, right? And on top of that, you have, basically just the Bucks and the Celtics are the two teams that you really have to go through. We'll see if Miami gets Dame or, if the Knicks end up getting somebody at some point because they have a ton of assets and they're really on the prowl for another star, right? There are things that could happen. There are things and directions that this could go that could lead to, okay, it makes sense for LeBron James to go to Philly. You'd have Joel Embiid, a top 5 player in the league. You'd have, Tyrese Maxey, a nice young level star, gives you kind of that Austin Reeves type player, however you feel, who's better. That's not the point. Point is you get that young, up and coming guy, a guy that's established that can take some of the workload off of LeBron James. And then you could build the rest of the roster, right? So Philly does make sense in that regard. But the reality is, why in the world would LeBron want to go to Philly, right? Not saying that he doesn't like Philly, the city or anything like that. I'm talking about the organization. They have been a dumpster fire since they got Joel Embiid. Think of all the disastrous moves and decision-making and just everything they've done. Losing Jimmy Butler, the Ben Simmons fiasco and the way they handled that. Now this James Harden thing, right? It's just it never ends. And it's at what point does Joel Embiid just say, all right, I'm out of here? Now, getting a guy like LeBron James may keep Joel Embiid on that, okay, I'll stick around at least until LeBron retires, right? Or LeBron leaves or does whatever. But it just, why would LeBron want to go to just a organization that the last few years has just been a dumpster fire? On top of that, he'd still have to handle more of a workload than what he'd have to do with the Lakers, right? Joel Embiid, he has injury issues just like Anthony Davis, and Joel Embiid completely disappears in the playoffs, right? At least Anthony Davis, when he disappears on the offensive end, is still shut down defensively, right? So however you feel about who's better, Joel Embiid and Anthony Davis, look, Anthony Davis, you can always count on that defense. You can always count on him to control and dictate games. We have seen Joel Embiid completely disappear and might as well not even be out there on the court. And that becomes a problem, right? So there's so many cons to LeBron going there. But the biggest thing is like either two things happen. Either A, the Lakers are really good and win the NBA championship, or B, they're really close, right? And I'm saying, assuming like guys are healthy going into the playoffs and all that stuff, right? The Lakers, as currently constructed, are a top 3 to 5 team in the league, right? Like they look amazing. They got depth, they got size, they got talent, they got everything that they need to have success, right? And to win an NBA championship. I really believe you can make a real argument that this is the deepest roster LeBron James has ever had. He's had, better front end rosters, but they were very front loaded, very front heavy. Where this front to back is just, you can make an argument for like 12 guys to start. That's ridiculous, right? And so he has the depth, he has the talent, he has the size. He doesn't have to have as much of a workload, right? He doesn't have to be the guy night in and night out. He can take days off, he can take games off, he can do all of those things. Where if he went to a team like Philly, he probably wouldn't be able to do that. Because Joel Embiid's going to miss his games and all that stuff. And it's like, if the Lakers win the NBA championship, there's no way LeBron's leaving. He probably either A, opts back in and runs it back, or B, he takes less money to try to bring in another guy just so that way they can try to go get his 6th NBA title, right? Because that's the only thing he really needs left is to just stack NBA championships. And the other thing is if they're close, he probably still does the same thing, right? Like if, let's say they lose in the Western Conference Finals again, it's like, okay, well, I can just take less money so we can go get another piece or two, and then we're off to the races and we can keep this roster and this core, right? Like the Lakers, front to back, have more depth and overall talent, right? Like you look at the Sixers and it's like, yeah, they have James Harden, they have Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris is great, and PJ Tucker, he's solid. Right, like I'm not saying like Philly has a bunch of scrubs, right? Like they have a good roster. They don't have the youth and the athleticism and the size and just the depth that the Lakers have. The Lakers have like a legit 13, and they still need to go sign another. They still need to go sign another big man, right? Like you look at this and it's just like there's not really a comparison. Right? Like, what is the Sixers' depth? And that was like a big problem last year, right? Like, that was one of the big question marks with Philly last year, right? You got James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, which James Harden says he's not reporting to training camp and is trying to implode that roster, right? So, James Harden's next year, James Harden would be gone. Tobias Harris would be gone, right? So, it would be LeBron James, Tyrese Maxey, and James Harden, right? Beyond that, you're basically having a shell of a roster that you're going to need to go and rebuild and retool and all that stuff. And there's not, like, next year's free agency class isn't this, like, ridiculously stacked class. It's not like next year's free agency has just, like, all these gems that you could go and, now you're cooking. And now it's like, oh, like, no, like, it's, the Lakers could basically keep everybody last year. You have the core, you have the experience, you have the chemistry, you have the camaraderie. They have assets to go make moves, to go make trades. The Lakers is a far better situation than Philadelphia is right now. The only argument that I see for LeBron wanting to go to Philly would be it's the Eastern Conference and I could probably do less with more, right? Because the only teams I'd have to go through is mentally weak Boston and then Giannis and the Bucks. Right, but if Giannis and the Bucks end up having another lackluster season, do they start making changes and making moves? Right, like how does that look? So, to me, that's the only real argument. Outside of that, like you're talking Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt. You got two sizable wings that one is just an absolute assassin out there offensively. You got another one who's a top 5 defensive player in the league, on-ball defensive guy, right? You have Anthony Davis, who is, a top 5 to 10 player in the league. You have Austin Reeves, who is just absolutely blossomed and emerged, and you imagine is only going to be better, that can just take so much pressure off of you, right? Like Tyrese Maxey isn't the playmaker that Austin Reeves is. That's why LeBron likes and trusts Austin Reeves so much. So LeBron's basically got to be the point guard, right? And he's got to do more on the Sixers than he does on the Lakers. And the Lakers would still have Gabe Vincent. You know, if you go and sign Christian Wood or, you know, like let's say Hayes and all the, let's say this roster does win an NBA championship. LeBron has the ability to retain everybody and keep everybody. Like literally, like, because the big concern is like, oh, well, you know, the Lakers won't be able to like re-sign some of these guys if they do. I mean, LeBron can. I mean, LeBron has the power. He could take 20 million less and let all these guys re-sign for, you know, reasonable deals, like get a little pay bump or something like that. Especially if they win a championship. You don't think guys are going to be more willing to try to go back to back? Of course they will. And LeBron has the power to make a tweak or two to go get another guy. Or if they want another star or whatever, they have the assets and the players to go do that. Philly doesn't have anything. Philly doesn't have any trade value, right? Outside of Maxey and Embiid. James Harden, you're not going to get a real return for James Harden, especially after all the implosion that he's caused, right? The Lakers have the ability to upgrade if need be. They have the ability to go get another star. They have draft picks that they could trade. They have guys like Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell that you could unload and move and if you need to. Gabe Vincent is also a very tradable contract if need be. Like, again, if something comes up that makes sense, I'm not saying that they will or they should or anything like that, but if something makes sense, like LeBron James going to Philly, it's silly to me. It makes zero sense. I do not get it. I just think that was like, hey, here's a headline attention thing. Let's talk about it, right? Those are my thoughts and opinions, and as always, I pass the question on to you. Let me know yours down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Somewhere in between? Could you see LeBron going to Philly? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments.